Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we have John Moore here. John, you've got some interesting links since we talked this morning. Steve Quailside, of course, has a link to a professionally produced video. We'll actually post this up so people can see it. It's basically showing ISIS, which is the organization supported by the United States government, which is Islamic terrorists, taking the Shiite prisoners, many of them in young men in soccer shirts, and dispatching them.
Right.
Just shooting them in the back of the head or whatever. This is pretty nasty. And
it's outright murder. It's outright murder. And these are our allies in the Middle East. They're also cannibals, by the way, and they're quite proud of the fact that they're cannibals in addition to... And when I say cannibals, I'm not being flippant. I'm being quite literal. They do eat the flesh of their victims. They do that, and they're proud of it.
Well, one of the things that I find particularly disturbing is those that think that this is just made up. We're doing this as, like, not late night, but early late night. A horror. No, we're not. This is not a theory either. It's not. This is video proof. In fact, the comments by Mr. Netanyahu he was very upset that the Islamic people and also international film people were coming in and taking what we call telegenic pictures of good-looking Palestinian dead children that was, quote, supporting their cause. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding. We have a mentally ill person who is basically saying this is a good idea to slaughter over 1,000 Palestinians. Now, here's my viewpoint. I thought when I was there in 1992 and 99, if they wanted to stop, quote, the coming in of material with rockets and so on, there was three things that they could have done. The first is they could have closed off the tunnels. By the way, many of these aren't tunnels, they're bomb shelters because the Israelis are bombing the heck out of them. The second thing they could have done is they could open up proper or commerce so it's not an open-air prison, 7 miles wide by 25 miles long. And they would have also allowed egress so they could go to not only the West Bank but also to Jordan or Egypt because it's a no-man's land all around it. It's like an open-air prison.
Let me give you the quick-hand version of what you're saying, Doctor. If these young men, if males between 18 and 40 years old had genuine economic opportunity, they'd be busy getting married, having babies, and buying BMWs instead of the silliness they're engaged in now.
Right. Yeah, and then, of course, it puts also in harm's way the Israelis because you're not just dealing with, we call the first wave, which are bottle rockets, so, maybe 4 to 6, 10 inches across that are going to carry basically no payload. They really can't cause any significant damage at all, and they're hitting them with these very expensive Iron Dome systems. The Iron Dome system is a sham, and the fact is, it was even the Israeli government who announced the fact that it was to protect military targets, not civilians. So if they believe this idiot Netanyahu and Lieberman, they're going to put the public in Israel in danger because when you push both sides too far, you get people do crazy things. Eventually, Hezbollah and Syria will launch real heavy payload weapons, and then if you blow them up, let's say if you hit them with something like a Patriot 2 system or Iron Dome, you're going to blow up, say, a fuel air bomb that makes it even more explosive and dangerous, or a biological or chemical weapon, or a dirty bomb, a sticky bomb where nuclear isotopes are there, like cobalt-60. So we're seeing craziness on both sides. The real issue is, though, who is the primary dominant force? It's Israel. Israel is bullying to death the Palestinians, and the collaborator is the nation of America. And America is doing evil there. And, of course, it's going to come back and it's going to bite them. In fact, it's biting us already because we're losing allies in Europe. The Europeans are not happy with being pushed with NATO into a conflict with Ukraine. And that thing, now the AP Newswire has come out and said the reports by the American State Department and the government are completely false that there was any collaboration of Russia with these downed planes. In fact, the evidence is now pointing to the fact, we thought initially it was an Israeli jet, but Israel is in collaboration with the Kiev people. It turns out now the Kiev government, which is illegitimate, with Mr. Poroshenko and these other characters, it's fallen. I don't know who's in charge now, but apparently the government that was there, which is illegitimate, it's fallen. I don't know who's in charge. That's a big mess, because we now know that the evidence is there were Ukrainian jets in the area, which they now report, this is AP Newswire, there were Israeli BUK missiles in the area that were shooting down in that area possible, what they thought were Eastern Ukrainian aircraft, and they maybe locked onto this aircraft. All of the evidence is pointing to the fact that the Poroshenko government now, which has fallen, it was responsible for this, and that's why probably the whole thing is flying apart. At the same time, Putin had enough sense to actually back off and just wait to see if this was going to play out. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people died in eastern Ukraine, including Donetsk, and I found out in my reports earlier that Biden's, I think it's his son or his nephew, is one of the heads of the company that's actually going to be exploring in the area of the eastern Ukraine, in the Donetsk basin, they call it, and also in the western area, which is not only Ukraine, but in the area just past Ukraine. What's it called?
Crimea? The Crimea?
It's no beyond Crimea. We're talking further west. We're not talking about Belarus. We're talking about some of these other areas. So what's happening in the West is to say it all comes down to oil again. And I was watching Gerald Celente, and he puts these maps on, thinking, Gerald, he has a bit of a tongue that can be a little bit obscene at times, but he gets his point across. Because I guess he says his blood boils and he feels Italian. But the fact is that we're dealing with a situation which is a little over the top. And it's not just over the top in one place, it's over the top in a lot of places. And now, of course, the State Department issues where they had moles literally stealing intelligence information from the Germans. The Germans are flushing the entire U.S. intelligence collaboration from Germany. That's the center part of Europe. There's like 100 and some million people in eastern and western Germany. The central warhorse of the European economy is Germany. So when Germany kicks out America and the State Department and all these so-called officials, it's not good. And Obama continues to stand there and grin and think everything's fine. It's not fine, Obama. You can't keep on banging the drum and saying I'm for Islam and I'm for Israel. You can't be for everybody. You got to come together and kind of say what's common sense here in the situation. Well, you need
the Clinton administration decimated human intelligence in the CIA, and they've been working to rebuild it ever since. And this is just another decimation of human intelligence. What's going on right now?
Yeah, by human intelligence, you mean the things like the fourth estate or the media, which is why
I mean CIA agents on the ground gathering information.
Yeah, they decimate the actual proper collection of information, and then
Precisely.
Actioning on that level of intelligence is gathered on the ground, because they even do the opposite of what their gathered information tells them. We have our own sources, and we have leaked sources too. And some of those leaked sources tell us that if the government believed what they actually got on the ground, they wouldn't do what they're doing.
Oh, I figured that out. I was a young intelligence analyst myself 40 years ago. What you're saying is true, but it's a separate topic.
Yeah, but just example is videos. I'm sure the intelligence people on the ground know that ISIS are crazy. Like, why would you give 3 weeks ago 74 Stinger missiles to ISIS when you see what they're doing lining up these Shiites? Duh. And the Christians in Mosul. Christians have been in Mosul, which is one of the centers of Christianity, forever in northern Iraq. They're all being killed and slaughtered and driven out of there. And those are the people we support in Mosul.
Well, I think they're finding safe haven with the Kurds, the Christians.
Yes, they are.
And God bless the Kurds. I mean, those people have been without a homeland for centuries now. And
interesting, the Kurds are many of them are actually part Cohen. Most people don't know this, but when the Cohens were brought from the northern tribes of Israel, they intermarried with the king and the daughter of the king of the Medes, and those entire tribes. This is 2,850 years ago. So all the Kurds have got some Cohenic blood, and the Cohens that returned to the Temple of Jerubbaal in the 5th century were all part Kurd. Interesting.
Okay.
Eh?
It is interesting.
Yes,
well,
they're all Kurd.
They're an interesting people. They're tough people. They're smart. They deserve some real estate they can call their own. I think every well,
they have Kirkuk and they have northern Iraq, and they have enough money to have their own military, so they're probably not going to lose that. What's going to happen, though, the partitioning that's going to happen in the state of Iraq caused by our meddling is going to partition it off to probably the best oil fields in the east will become part of the Iranian territory.
Really?
And what the so-called Shia will get, the Sunnis, will get, is going to be not very oil-rich, because they don't have the north and don't have the east, but they have American support at slaughtering Shiites.
Right.
Welcome back, and we have, Mark, you have some comments about Dr. Garrow doing some notification, and John, you mentioned on the break that you're familiar with Dr. Garrow.
In fact, I'm interviewing Dr. Garrow at 8 o'clock Central Time tomorrow morning.
Yeah. So why don't we kind of bring out the question, Mark? And we're talking about the plan to bomb malls. In fact, I think today was one of the days when there was a quite a high danger of bombing of malls, tied to some kind of Muslim day. I don't know which feast day it is, or maybe there's not a feast day. Maybe it's tied to a quote, an activity that was against Islam. I don't know. But what's the story? And John, you know more about this, so how about you carry it?
Sure. First of all, Dr. Garrow ran schools for the children of the elite in China, and came in close contact, personal, first-name basis with the current Prime Minister of China, for example, during his 20-plus years doing that activity. And, of course, at the same time, he was a covert operative for the CIA. Excellent cover. Regardless, there's two ways we look at intelligence, and I am a former intelligence analyst. One is you look at the source, the other you look at the information itself. Even if Dr. Garrow was a homeless person on Times Square, his information would not be inconsistent with what we already know. So I do give Dr. Garrow a high rating for his credibility, standing on his own 2 feet. In addition, the attacking shopping malls is something that's been on our plate for many years, since 9/11/01. Our enemies do want to attack us. Hitting 400-plus shopping centers at the same time is what Dr. Garrow was warning about. The EMP part, I'm not sure if he's warning about that or not. Dave Hodges is. I have. Dr. Bill, you've warned about EMP.
In fact, we've had experts on talking about that.
Yeah, former Speaker of the House.
Mr. Malouf's book about the impending danger. You've just put an MALOOF.
Mitigation. Let's talk about mitigation. I mean, most men I know. I go to a shopping mall one day a year, about 5 days before Christmas, to get something for my wife. I never set foot in one otherwise. So don't go to the shopping mall on 3 days of the year. I mean, that's not terribly difficult and will cause no harm to anybody I know. And as far as EMP attack, that's on the plate all the time. It's 24/7. Right. It's always a threat. Dr. Garrow giving us 3 specific dates is helpful to help maybe raise some people's level of awareness, get them to look into things they may not look into otherwise. And worst case scenarios, don't go to shopping malls for 3 days out of 365. That can cause no possible harm.
Yeah, I don't see it's a big problem. I really don't understand why that's an issue. But here's the situation. Things are really heating up in the Middle East. We have parties like the Pope that wants to bring about some kind of peace treaty. He's trying to bring in all the Abrahamic covenants together. And it may seem like in a bigger sense, that seems good, we're going to have peace. But it's peace in the place of dogma, and it also puts the parties involved almost taping together. It's like taping together people that have bomb vests on together, still with access to get their hand out and push the button. Israel, for example, having nuclear weapons and being tied directly to now a partitioned state's not a good thing. And the Palestinians and the Hezbollah having lots of rocket weapons that they can rocket the heck out of Israel, that's not good either. So we're not saying that either party is good. But obviously the actions of the Israelis is what I call in a panic. And the reason why they're in a panic right now is they know there's going to be a greater, wider war really soon. The things like cleaning out the access to parts for rockets, including big ones, not just the bottle rockets they've already used, because their good stuff they have sequestered away. They're not going to use their, quote, good stuff, either they or the Hezbollah or Syrians. And apparently there's been a few rockets that have come out of Syria as well, coming toward Israel. Israel should know they can't survive a Syrian rocket war. They can blow the heck out of Damascus with one nuke, but they will not survive a Syrian rocket war. Those rockets coming in, they will not be able to stop the percentages that will allow their population to survive. And that's what's crazy. We have the bluster of Netanyahu, and really, we're at the point now where we need, as General MacArthur said, a new way of negotiating, because he knew the next war would be a nuclear war. It would be a war that would be so out of control that if people don't start assuming the position of Jesus, which is to bring real peace rather than pseudo-peace, we're going to blow everything up, or die of plagues, or radiation exposure, God knows what. And so I think that we're at the nexus now where we're going to probably have that peace treaty. We're in the blood moons. We had the first one this spring. We're trying to get Mark Belts on. He's had a very busy summer, see if we can get him back on to talk about it. But I think that we're probably going to have we'd have one or two things that's going to happen soon. We're going to have an expanding Middle Eastern war that'll drive the price of oil up. And besides crashing the German economy with continued threats to Russia, it almost certainly is going to crash the European and the world economy. So if you blow up the Middle East with a big war, the world economy finally goes right over the edge, and we have a worldwide, not recession or anything else like that. They keep on extending out this recession stuff. We're in a depression. We have a contraction of the actual GDP of the nation. 2.99%, I think it is, per year, just the first quarter of the year. Not good.
No,
when the new numbers come out for the second quarter, my guess is they're going to show a further contraction at a specific rate, probably around 3%, which means our economy is going south. And if America goes south, which is the engine for the world, including China, the reason why China is blowing up is because they can't sell their stuff to us. They have to have warehouses to stick it. And their business is being withdrawn by transnational Nazi corporations that control all the governments because they're not dealing good with the communist Chinese and the corporate heads there. They're pulling it and moving it to Malaysia, India, elsewhere. So when you don't play ball with the global powers, even if you're a big nation like China, they just pull it and send it off to somewhere else, like Africa or India. And the Chinese are learning a hard lesson. We can build you up and we can tear you down. And this is what's going on with even Poroshenko's government. Those people don't realize they don't have any real support. And if they ever had real elections monitored by the United Nations, it would be evident that they didn't include these other republics they're bombing into the Stone Age, Donetsk and Slavyansk, where they're killing people in schools and in their own homes. So we need more rational heads to prevail here. But we don't need a compromise.
Dr. Bill, may I add something very quickly?
Sure.
Dr. Garrow's information relates to a martial law scenario, and it would be a really hard martial law, really, really hot one when you consider.
Okay, you got to describe what martial law is now. The martial law expert is Alex Jones. Okay, he's Mr. Martial Law.
Sure.
But I don't think it'll play out the same way that Alex says it is, for several reasons. There's going to be pushback from the public. Parts of it will be a lot worse than that. Other parts cannot be anywhere near as bad. And I'll tell you why. The first thing is that within hours, and I know this from working with the government, within hours to days, most police, firefighters, military, and veterans will all go to the side of the public. There'll be small little cliques of gangs that will try to control certain territories, but the so-called government and even foreign troops on our soil will be irrelevant. So yes, they can put black ski mask guys and they can put AR-70 machine guns on the turrets on the freeways, and they can do things like that, but full martial law, no way. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report and Clay and Iron Show. So, John, what do you think of that last comment? I personally don't think that martial law will play out like a lot of the war gamers that, they put it into computers like the one at Stanford and other war game supercomputers that the Pentagon has, trying to play out what the public will do, etc. The real fact is that the globalists have what they call irrational hubris, and their president, et cetera, and other people, they make executive orders like we're going to outlaw AK-47s and all this kind of armament. All it does is make sure people have the stuff. And the pushback is even our tactical teams like SWAT teams in New York State that basically beg the governor not to force them to actually go to homes of veterans to take back fully automatic weapons that were issued when they were discharged from the military. These are law-abiding citizens that are not crazy. And, of course, we had on last week Michael Connolly, the attorney for the U.S. Justice Foundation, where the U.S. government and the VA hospital are actually classifying people who have temporary adjustment depression and other things as mentally ill, or if their wife handles their bills, they're not capable or competent because their wife is paying their bills. I don't think that's a yardstick you can use in legal or other courts.
That's at least half the households in this country where the woman takes care of balancing the checkbook.
Exactly, yeah.
At least.
So, to me, this is a sham. All it's going to do is force people who are on the fence to say, no, Deagle, John, you guys are mentally ill, while we're sitting around at the barbecue. You got to get a life. And it takes those people and pushes them over the fence where now they're enraged to say, you wouldn't believe, they're now standing at the barbecue saying, you wouldn't believe what XYZ executive order Obama did now. And you don't even need to approach people. A couple of years ago when you'd say these things, they'd say, you're nuts, you're crazy, right. You need a pill, give me a shot, you should be in a posy jacket in the psych ward. Why are you practicing medicine when you knew this stuff? Well, guess what? I didn't want to know this stuff. I didn't want to know this stuff when I was the ex-examiner for the Oklahoma City Murrah special op forensics team. They came back, all 5 of them, and one of them told me he wanted to be checked for radiation. I didn't want to know the stuff about Columbine. I didn't want to know the stuff about U.S. Space Command and the underground array and the trillions of dollars spent on weird projects. I didn't want to know the human experimentation crap going on at UCLA and other places across the country and elsewhere in Europe, like Tavistock. I don't want to know this stuff. I would much rather go through life, believing that everything is roses and this world is nice and everybody has a peaceful existence and we really don't hate and kill each other. We don't fund, like with Obama, we don't going to massively increase funding for abortion. And why don't we change the U.S. government to the USSA? Because we're like the Soviet Union in its darkest days. And we're now a total fusion with corporate power. So if the corporations say XYZ is good, kill them damn Palestinians. I mean, I personally don't like rocket attacks on Israel. But why didn't they do this 20 years ago to simply surgically go into those tunnels and make sure that rockets weren't getting in there? Then make it humanely livable so these people can get out of there and actually get a job in Egypt or the Sinai Peninsula or have a life. So you don't compress people into the point where they get desperate. Desperate people do desperate things.
They do, and their Arab neighbors have some guilt to blame.
Sure, they do.
I should say.
Jordan should have accepted a lot of these people, and Egypt. I mean,
Jordan
a lot of these people
Egypt,
should have been.
They've made sure these people remain homeless and refugees.
Right.
I haven't been to the Middle East, but from what I've seen, Doctor, it's mostly the same barren rocks and sand and dirt that I wouldn't pay $50 an acre for.
Yeah,
and there's plenty of it to spare. There's no shortage of barren, godforsaken dirt and rock and sand in the Middle East that they could have given these Palestinians places to live and work and not be refugees. But that hasn't happened, and that's from the people in Jordan and Lebanon and Egypt that have made sure these people remain homeless.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, that's part of the non-Christian viewpoint of Islam. It's almost what I call like the Hindu philosophy of you're a higher caste because you're deserved from the previous incarnation in life, and now you got it good because you're good in the last life. I mean, it's like, I'm doing well, what's wrong with you, buddy, kind of attitude.
Pretty much. The Palestinians were treated as Negroes by the whites in the South 100 years ago. By their Arab neighbors.
Yeah, exactly. So they're a good part of the problem too. And by the way, the problem isn't to immigrate them to America. I mean, Obama's problem is bring them all in. That's crazy too. And we created that crisis in Guatemala and Nicaragua, and it allowed advertising, even if we didn't sponsor it, which I'm pretty certain that Obama and his cohorts in the Democratic Party sponsored that advertising or contributed or gave false information. And they should have just put a report out right away. Hey, no, this is not the place to come here. If you really are a refugee, come with your child. Don't just drop your child at the door in a basket, because our immigration laws are the mother should accompany the child if you're going to be a refugee. Our laws don't even come into the effect. So when the United Nations wants to beat up America because our laws are different than the United Nations who can't rule over us, that's pretty stupid.
It is.
And then, of course, on the other hand, what we do is, who's going to pay for all this? We already have an economy that's going downhill. I mean, the average young person getting into a new job nowadays is earning 20% less than before the recession in 2008. So they're earning 20% less with the price of homes going up. Now there's more homes being sold, and the mortgage rate is relatively low, but the housing prices are going up. So the cost of food and everything's inflating. The real inflation rate's around 10 to 12% per year. It's not 3% or 2%. So what's going on is the middle class is being decimated. And the average young person has got a giant debt coming out of school. They can't afford to host their car. They're basically like the Palestinians in a sense, but not nearly as bad yet. But it could change. I mean, with Obama's policies of really ticking off Russia and China and the BRICS nations, we could, over the next 4 or 5 years or 10 years, be dealing, if we don't have a big war, which is probably going to happen first, we're probably going to have a major economic downturn as the dollar doesn't become one of the world reserve currencies. And again, a lot of what we have is because we could just go print more money. They say, hey, Pentagon needs another $500 billion. Just hose down the printing presses and just go crazy and print it. we need another 50 million for all these new refugees we created because we killed the Guatemalan male natives, because the CIA operatives thought it was a good idea to have a massive surge across the border to kind of force the issue of the immigration through executive orders before Obama's term's over. That's what's going on here. And I personally think if we really had a refugee problem, send down air-conditioned buses. Don't let them die in the death train. This is crazy. But don't let men get on there that are 16 or 17 years of age. They've got MS-13 drug tattoos and they've got razor blades in their pockets and they've got an attitude. I mean, what are we thinking?
Well, letting known members of criminal gangs into this country and giving them aid and comfort is treason as far as I'm concerned.
Well, when I hear Boehner say that he's not considering impeachment of Obama, the guy looks like a not dried out alcoholic. It is really disturbing. It's like, come on, Boehner, get with the program. There's enough people now that we had Michael Connolly. They've tabled these impeachment documents. Get on with it, guys. If you don't impeach him soon, he will have some form of martial law probably by the fall or early spring. If there's any possibility that he may not get his full agenda rammed down our throats before he leaves, he'll do it by executive order, martial law, whatever. But he'll have to have a platform to do it from. And if he can't get collaboration during his so-called, his exit plan, he'll just ram it down our throat with martial law. And then, of course, he'll shut down the internet. He'll shut down networks like GCN. Because if we say anything controversial, we'll be considered like, persona non grata. We will not be able to broadcast beyond our limits of our yard, let alone across the nation and the world.
That's right.
Dr. Bill, may I make a comment here relative to Dr. Garrow's comments? I think that I thought I had heard 100 malls were to be bombed, but if it's actually 400 malls, such as John Moore says, I personally feel this would cause so much fear in this country that most of the people would come under martial law gratefully.
Well, the thing is, what they would have is the fear bomb. They don't need to bomb any malls. Maybe they bomb 2 malls. But it'll be the fear that 400 could be bombed that will allow them to capitulate. Because to a great extent, people have already capitulated by not talking about these things. Welcome back. And, John, we were talking on the break with Mark, and I always talk about his percentages. I think in the initial American Revolution, there's probably less than 1%. They were landed gentry that owned the land and had something to lose. They had weapon systems, and they didn't have all the things they needed. A lot of time, Canada were being pushed along by people that didn't have proper boots, and their feet were torn. They were in the mud. It was frozen ground. They're getting frostbite. But that percentage rose from less than 1% to 4 to 5%. Pretty soon, a significant minority were pushing back against the British, and there's no way they could stand a guerrilla warfare against the British, just stand out there trying to do typical type warfare. I think the same thing is going to happen here. I think eventually, if things get rough enough, the good people of America will eventually just withdraw away to secure communities and secure locations away from the craziness. And a lot of people will be in the cities until they realize that, hey, FEMA's not coming for you, like in Katrina. The government's not going to fix things for the poor and the hungry. They're not going to fix the water as the economy crashes down, or if we're under some kind of attack because we've decided to take on Iran or Syria. So can you give some prepper tips? Because I really think that, to a great extent, people are willingly gutless and willingly ignorant, but in the face of knowing the truth in their soul and their central being, they're going to turn, and there's going to be some pushback of a significant minority that's going to freak out. And this is what really freaks out, even in they get cold sweat dreams, the globalists, knowing that they're not going to get away with this without a heck of a fight.
Absolutely. Well, here's some prepper tips, Doctor. We talk frequently about 2 skills, the skills of ham radio operators and skills of emergency medical treatment. But there's other skills that would be highly desirable in either a short-term or a long-term crisis. If you're in a long-term crisis, 99% of your time, you'll be doing things that require the following skills: operating, maintaining, and repairing machinery, which would be mechanical skills, carpenter skills, electrician skills, plumber's skills. Because if you don't have these skills, plus the tools and supplies to do the jobs, Well, your electrical work won't get done, your plumbing work won't get done, and your mechanical work won't get done. Because the people that you can usually call on the telephone from the Yellow Pages, well, there won't be any telephone.
Yellow Pages were used to start the fire to keep them from freezing to death.
Now, out where I live, if a man has an issue with his tractor, it's an act of pride to be able to take care of himself, and an act of almost shame and almost humiliation to have to take it to the tractor dealer. That's a last-ditch thing to do. These men take personal pride in their ability to operate, maintain, and repair almost everything they own. And that's the way it is out here in the country.
It also means a little older style, non-fancy equipment.
I jokingly say that most American males under age 40 would die if you put a pistol to their head and said, change your spark plug in your car. They couldn't do it. Most American males under age 40 these days, they don't have the basic skills that men 45, 50 years and older grew up having. So gentlemen, get the skills. Get the skills your dads and grandfathers routinely had. Get them now while you can. Get the tools you need. Get the supplies you need to maintain and repair whatever you might have out on your hobby farm or out on your hobby ranch. Get those skills and build on them.
Yeah, you can also buy older equipment that easy to make, to repair, easier to resort to. A lot of the new vehicles, for example, is funny. I was just talking to someone who recently got a Kia, and it's got all kinds of electronic whiz-bang gadgets, but this is a piece of garbage car. It just doesn't work. It just fails, and you think, well, is it the battery? Is it the starter? Is it this? Is it that? It goes, so my friend, this car went back to the dealer. This is typical of things nowadays. There's too many electronics that can fail that can make the vehicle just not work.
As somebody stole my neighbor's $20,000 almost new hay baler 2 weeks ago, but the hay baler is married up to a computer and will not work without that computer, which wasn't stolen.
No.
It's just scrap metal. It's just scrap metal.
That's too funny.
It is funny. Yes.
So in other words, without having stolen the computer too, the hay baler is like, why did you do that? That's not going to work. You can't even resell it.
No, can't sell it, can't do anything with it except take it to the scrap dealer. And of course, if you take a $20,000 hay baler to the scrap dealer, the police are going to be called instantly.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's probably got serial numbers and it's got low jack on it and other things that are going to tell the
Well,
person.
It doesn't have to. I mean, most people that run scrap yards are basically honest men and women, and you bring in an almost new scrap, hay baler to sell for scrap, they're going to call the cops.
So that was like from the movie Dumb and Dumber. This was one of those Dumb and Dumber moments.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, what other prepper tip? Because a lot of people keep on touting this idea of martial law. I'm actually not that worried about it. And I'll tell you why. There's what I call level 1 martial law is they stick to black ski mask guys, maybe Russians, just so they get scary because they speak with Russian accent and they're maybe 2 inches taller than the average special forces. And they have them outside the banks. And then maybe they take some guys and put 50 caliber machine guns and some big tanks by the freeway, and they check all the cars for your papers, please. Make sure that you're not on their list. There's not a lot they can do. No. It's like what they're trying to do even policing in Gaza. Those Israelis, even with all their helicopter gunships and fancy jets and everything, revved up F-15s, and they have them all juiced up so they got so much energy. They can't do much when they get in a real closed area like these streets and back alleys and so on in Gaza. They're going to die.
Well, a lot of martial law manpower will be consumed in protecting infrastructure. You're looking at 2 12-hour shifts, more likely 3 8-hour shifts a day, to protect the electrical power grid infrastructure, telecommunications, freshwater supply infrastructure, sewage treatment plants. When you look at the kind of manpower requirements just to do that and nothing else, you're looking at huge logistics problems, manpower problems, and so forth. Airports, bridges, dams. Yeah. It's a massive.
Continental lower 48 is about 2.5 million square miles, so it's a little bit of a problem where you even take a tiny fraction of that for cities and towns and try to think you're going to control and protect the infrastructure. And then, yes, they can do things like shut down regular commerce, but guess what? I already talked to guys as long as 20 years ago about computing on the cyberspace cloud and encrypting it. So literally, we do cloud computing and encrypt it deep into the actual stream of data that the government's doing. They wouldn't even know we're there. Broadcasting video, audio, anything we want. So the idea they're going to shut us down, they're delusional. They're delusional. And there's guys that we know that work for these companies, or our contractors have been there for decades, and they've already figured out ways to get around whatever plan they have to do stuff to us. So this idea that martial law is going to play out the way they expect it, it might be a made-for-TV movie, so you can have some flash pictures of big tanks and people can't get their ATM card working. And, of course, if anybody has clues, they're going to have some real cash in their secure box at home. They're going to have gold and silver coins. They're going to have barterable materials like food and other things people need, maybe diapers, peanut butter, frozen foods. And they have a backup power system, so it's still frozen. I mean, even just being able to generate ice will be a really big thing. If you're the only person in your neighbor that actually has backup power, so you could generate all the ice you want and give it to them in bags so their food doesn't rot, they're going to love you. Just generating ice.
Absolutely. There's going to be plenty of workarounds. American people can be very clever when they need to be to do workarounds and get around whatever hardship might be imposed on them.
That's why Americans own all the patents in the world. Because they've been constantly reinventing the nation. And it wouldn't matter what president or who's the globalist running it, the American inventiveness will always overcome that as long as we're godly. And I really think first is God preparation first. But secondly, I think people just need to get out of the box. And then at some point, if we have to withdraw away from the cities and towns by steps, so eventually we're in secure communities and we just kind of look over the hill like, Jonah did over at the Nineveh and said, hey, God, when are you going to fry them? Well, he's going to fry them pretty soon.
Well, Doctor, it's good to be with you as always, and this is the Liberty Man signing off.
Absolutely amazing program today. Good points. As I say, don't freak out. God's on the throne. Prep every day. Prep yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually. Get yourself off the toxic drugs. Get on Nutrimeds. Get yourself your ability to dehydrate food. Help your neighbors. Remember, this is a community thing. It's not a personal survival thing. Anybody who thinks it's just you and mom and a couple kids and a dog going to survive, not going to happen.
No,
it's got to be a community thing.
That's the worst thing you could possibly do.
Yeah. Take care. We'll be back tomorrow. Another amazing show, and your calls are welcome every day of the week except first hour Friday. 800-259-5791. And have a wonderful evening, and get your Nutrimeds at Nutrimedical.com.